maina iwi Tato e Paia te maramatanga Me te aroha I ngā iwi Ki ako tapatahi Ki ako taira Tato e Te tero maina iwi Tato e Te tero maina iwi Tato e Paia te maramatanga Me te aroha I ngā iwi Ki ako tapatahi Ki ako taira Tato e Tato e Ioi. Probably should have practiced with the korowai on. Thanks to it. Kia ora everybody. This is extremely special. I'm very pleased to be here today. I ngā mana, i ngā reo, e raurangatira mā, tēnā koutou katoa. I ngā mate, haere, haere, haere atu rā. I ngā iwi kua hui hui nei, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko ngā pui tuku iwi, no tamaki makaurau, a hau ko Jason Gurney toa. It's amazing to be here today. I'm very excited. It's quite overwhelming seeing everyone here and feeling a lot of aroha in the room. It's really amazing. And what an amazing spot. I just want to thank the Wharewake team for this amazing spot, but also the beautiful day they put on. It's really fabulous. So this picture is more or less the last time that I played guitar in front of this many people. This photo was taken at the 1997 Northern Region Smoke-Free Rock Quest final. My band was called Peasants with Pitchforks back then. Our hits included a song called Pooh and Will We Ever Learn? I don't remember the second one for some reason. I must have blacked out after singing Pooh. It was pretty deep stuff. The first band I was in actually, which was before this, the year before this one, was called Scaby Blossom. And our hits included Little Brother and another one called Pink. And my favourite lyric in Pink is, the main lyrics were, "Pink is a very funny colour, yeah." Shout out to Mum, who's sitting right up in the front here, for keeping all the clippings from back then. In fact, that previous picture there, she had this kind of made especially from the Advocate, Northern Advocate up north, and printed out in like A3, A1 size, so I could put it on my wall, and it still hangs in my garage at home. When I was 15, I was absolutely certain that I was going to be a rock star. My musical diet included these bands, Pearl Jam, Radiohead, which those of you discerning among you would have heard Radiohead as you were walking in because I was DJing. The Offspring, NoFX, Nirvana, all of these bands that if you had to describe them would be very much a kind of suburban angst-filled parkyard playlist. This was very much the playlist that I was listening to back then. Which kind of brings me to talking about being Pākehā. So this is my mum and dad who are sitting right up here at the front. And I did ask for permission to use this picture, although there are certain photos later that I didn't ask permission for. So I'll ask forgiveness now rather than permission. Now, I didn't ask you this. Was this on the day of your engagement? So this is the day of their engagement in 1975? 5? So clearly she said yes, which is helpful. Literally wouldn't be here. I have the most wonderful, supportive, loving parents of anyone. All you guys, sorry, you're runners up. My parents are the best. Just wonderful, lovely, kind, loving people. So I grew up in a mixed Māori Pākehā household. My mum is 4th generation English, 3rd generation Irish. Both sides of her tūpuna emigrated to New Zealand like a lot of people in the late 1800s or early 1900s. So her dad's side of the family, the English side of the family, come from Gloucester, and her Irish side of the family come from Northern Ireland, which is why I don't mind losing to Ireland occasionally. Neville. England I'm not so okay with. I'm okay if we beat them all the time. So it was very, it was a very typical kind of migration pattern from the UK. They were looking for a better life. When my whānau came, when my mum's whānau came here, they were kind of in the middle here, this patch here. So this is immigration. It's the first of the graphs you're going to see tonight. I promise you there isn't much data tonight. It's not that kind of IPL. So they kind of moved over in this, just after the sort of peak of assisted immigration here to New Zealand, sort of around about here for those looking on the left-hand side of the screen, sort of late 1800s, early 1900s. And I think probably for simplicity, we'll focus on Mum's Irish side of the family. So they moved from Ireland over to the north of the North Island, and they settled in a place called Poneke. In 1916, Mum's Irish tupuna bought 125 acres of land at Poneke from local Māori, and that's where they settled. So just to orientate you a little bit, so this is the north. So obviously at the top there you can see Cape Reinga. But also, like if you look down, in fact, if I can, no, I can't move this one. So this is Whangarei Harbour in here. This is like Mangawhai, Pakiri, all leading up to here. So Whananaki is very much kind of towards the far north, about 45 minutes northeast of Whangarei. This is it from a different viewpoint. And to orientate you, Whananaki is just about an hour's south drive from Waitangi. So it all happened in the north, man. Like we're not far from where basically everything happened. Whananaki is my tūnanga waiwai, so it's a very beautiful place. Essentially all of my childhood, so this photo was taken from our batch in Maurice's Bay. All of my childhood memories, 90% of my childhood memories happened within about 100 metres of the spot where this photo was taken. We would pack up the car, the day after school finished at the end of the year, and Mum and us would jump in the car, and Dad unfortunately would have to keep working in Whangarei, but we'd head off to the beach for 6 weeks and just stay there. So that's why all my childhood memories happened there. This is taken inside of a batch, so if you were looking out the window, you'd be looking basically at that view there. I was sitting on I don't know what I was doing, but I was clearly having a great time. All of my birthdays, so I'm a January baby, I was born on January 2nd, so all of my birthdays happened there when I was growing up. And I didn't care that I didn't have mates because I had the best place in the world to hang out. This is my brother, and I did not ask for permission to use this photo because for some reason he's looking angry at the ocean. I'm not entirely sure why, but we were building forts. We were pretty keen on building forts back then. And this is the batch, so just above there you can see the batch. That batch has actually moved now because erosion tends to happen. My roots at Whananaki are very much on my mum's side of my English-Irish sort of settlers, which brings me to talking about being Māori. So my Māori ancestry comes from my dad's side. So here's me. This is a very handsome dad, and we're just going to focus on one side of the family. So this is his parents, which is that's my granddad Bert on the left-hand side, and that's my Nana Leah on the right-hand side. We've lost both of them, but there they are. And we'll focus on Nana Leah's side of the whānau first. So Nana Leah was Irene was her mum. So this is Irene. So Irene gave birth to Leah. And then Catherine gave birth to Irene, and standing next to Catherine is a really interesting guy named Joe Pepe. He was this crazy Portuguese guy, but that's a story for another day. So Catherine gave birth to Irene, and then Irina gave birth to Catherine, and Irina was the daughter of Ururoa. And Ururoa was a chief up north. Ururoa was a really interesting character. So he's a chief from Te Tai Tokerau, and particularly around the Whangaroa harbour region. And he was Hongi Hika's right-hand man. He had 3 wives and 28 children. So being a kind of ancestor of Ururoa isn't particularly unique if you're up north, I would imagine. I imagine that family tree sprawls out pretty widely. But yeah. So as evidence of kind of his, I guess, mana, Ururoa was the second northern chief to sign He Whakaputanga, which is our 1835 Declaration of Independence. Pretty big deal. So that's his kind of scrawl. If you imagine, he didn't write Ururoa, obviously. This is his signature on the right-hand side of his name. And if we just read a segment of He Whakaputanga, the sovereignty, kingship and the mana from the land of the Confederated Tribes of New Zealand are here declared to belong solely to the true leaders of our gathering. And we also declare that we will not allow any other group to frame laws nor any governorship to be established in the lands of the Confederation. Now, sounds good. The only problem was it was written by James Busby, for those that know their history, not the Northern Chiefs themselves. And there's a whole, that's another story for another day, what He Whakaputanga was really about. It does bring to mind another quote, which is, if it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. And that was said by another great Northern man, which is Kevin Te Pai. That's who I learned that one from. So I grew up in Whangarei. So Whangarei, as I mentioned before, is about 45 minutes inland, sort of south and inland from Whananaki. And growing up in Whangarei, being Māori was, well, it was pretty Māori. It was pretty normal. Our celebrities were Māori. So on the left there, we've got Stormin Norman Berryman. Anyone know Stormin Norman? Stormin Norman was my absolute hero when I was growing up. I used to sit at Okata Park on a Saturday and watch him play. He played for the All Blacks, played for Crusaders. He was a legend. Not many people remember that Billy T was from Whangarei. He went to Whangarei Boys High, just like Dad did. So he's another Whangarei celebrity. Sid Going, All Black, a lot of cool rugby players actually from up north. And we even had celebrity politicians from Whangarei too. And this is definitely his coolest haircut, I think, on Winston. Growing up in Whangarei also kind of gave me a front seat view to the politics that grew out of our colonial past. So when I was going to Kamo High School up north, Māori wardens would circulate at lunchtime. That was just normal. That happened every lunchtime. Protests and road closures were kind of normal-ish as well. I don't know if you guys remember, but we had a couple of summers where we couldn't go to Whananaki for Christmas because the road was closed by local Māori. And I bet you, yeah, Nicole probably remembers that actually. And I bet you if I look back now, I remember us being really irritated at the time, but I bet you if I look back now as the reason for why they closed the road, I probably agree with them. There probably was something pretty deep happening that I wasn't aware of. And then school trips and holidays, because when you're in Whangarei, like Waitangi's just up the road, school trips and holidays to Waitangi were pretty common. In fact, I had an amazing family that really wanted us to learn our history, learn where we came from, so we spent quite a bit of time rolling around the treaty grounds. And if you haven't been, it's incredible now. They've pumped a lot of money into really making it pretty special place. Okay, so the epidemiologists in the room can wake up now, because we're going to talk about NZ debt. So this is Whangarei and the surrounding districts broken down by area deprivation. So for those that haven't seen what NZ debt looks like, so the colours reflect something called an NZ debt score. So the lighter the colour, the less deprived the area. The darker the colour, the more deprived the area is, right? So this is the Whangarei district, and if I zoom in a little bit closer, this is what Whangarei where the majority of people in Whangarei live. So Whangarei is roughly split down the middle by the main trunk line, so the railway track kind of runs down the middle and State Highway 1 kind of runs down there as well. And the most deprived areas tend to be on the east side of the trunk line. The less deprived areas tend to be on the west side. And crucially, there is a pretty clear relationship between where my Māori peers live and where my Pākehā peers live when I was growing up in Whangarei. So the regions where Māori live tend to be in the dark red, highly deprived areas, and the regions where the Pākehā live tend to be in the lighter coloured, less deprived regions. The blue marker here is the house that I grew up in. So that's Carlton Cres in Kamo. We grew up in a wonderful house that was built by my grandfather, Mum's dad, Bruce. It was an amazing street, lovely street, a few streets over from where the main trunk line was. If I was awake in the night, I could hear the midnight train kind of clacking just gently in the distance as it made its way down the trunk line. So that was Whangarei. Of course, I'm not just Pākehā or Māori, I'm both. And actually, being both has always been my superpower. I've always felt like it was my superpower. It's allowed me to pass kind of through the Māori and Pākehā worlds pretty easily and to understand where other people's views come from. But we'll come back to that later because it kind of has helped me a little bit later on in my public service roles. Finding science. My first real science teacher was my gorgeous wife, Sarah. We met when I was 16 and she was 17, and we've been together ever since, apart from 3 days that we won't talk about. On my first day at university, I was enrolled in a Bachelor of Science. I went over to her place, and the first words, once I walked through the door, the first words out of my mouth was, "What's a cell?" I had somehow made it through multiple high schools without ever learning what a cell was, and there's a long story behind that. Basically, I flunked School C science, and so took geography instead. So I managed to make my way through to university entrance without understanding what a cell was. Sarah was very patient with me. She sat me down, she explained it very simply, and for some reason 16-year-old boys will listen to 17-year-old girls when they teach them. I don't know why. But she was the first person who sat me down and explained these things to me. So she was my first science teacher. I guess she's my second science teacher, or maybe my kind of primordial science teacher though, was my beautiful sister Nicole. Nicole taught me that even if you come home from your first day at uni and you don't know what a cell is, you have no excuse not to work hard and figure it out. And I've always been very grateful for that. And yes, I had long hair. I was really cool. To the academics in the audience, does everyone have an academic dad or mum? Do you guys think in those terms? I'm wondering if it's a German thing because I was taught it by Germans. So my academic dad is this guy right here. His name's Uwe Kirsting. He ran a biomechanics lab at the University of Auckland. I've been struggling, to be fair, through an undergrad degree at the University of Auckland. I mean, you heard how day one went. It basically continued for a couple of years. But we had a laboratory session, I think in my third year, which was probably my second year actually when it came to the grades, where he showed us all these cool things like motion capture cameras, force plates, pressure platforms, working with patients with diabetes, all these sorts of things. Detecting high pressure areas and how that related to them getting ulcers and how that related to reducing amputation risk and all these sorts of things. After that lab, I went home and I thought about it. And then I gave him a call and I asked him if I could just intern, if I could come and help out at his lab. And the phone went quiet. And then he said, I have a patient coming at 4:30. Can you be here? And I said, hell yeah. He didn't want to see my grades. He didn't care what my grades were. He didn't care if I didn't know what a cell was. All he cared about was that I cared and I was passionate about wanting to learn from him. And I spent many years working under him, and he really taught me how to be inquisitive and how to be an academic, or at least the first start of me being an academic. These are Sarah's feet, believe it or not. So I would throughout my years in the biomechanics lab, I would rope Sarah into as many things as I could because you need test subjects. This is not her foot. This is the kind of thing that we're trying to prevent, which is a diabetic foot ulceration. You're glad I put that next to your one? Yeah. But that's the thing essentially that we're trying to prevent happening. And my PhD work was really about trying to detect these problems, improve these problems before they got to the part on the right. My first HRC summer studentship, and I say that firmly, HRC summer studentship, and why these things are so important, was in Uwe's laboratory in 2003. And the project was called the Māori Foot. That's as vague as it was. And this here was one of my first ever journal articles. It looked at ethnic differences in the pressures under the feet between those with and without diabetes. So I started with him in 2003 and then left with a PhD in the biomechanics of the diabetic foot at the end of 2010. So I was really grateful for that opportunity that he gave me. This is my PhD thesis, 330 pages, and the nicest thing that my examiner said when I was at my Viva, the oral exam, was, thank you for that, I'm using it as a doorstop now. It was a hefty tome. It focused on foot complications among Māori and non-Māori with diabetes. I counted them, 188 words of those 330 pages were on epidemiology. And it was by far the easiest and most natural section of the thesis that I had to write. And that brings me to talking about this person. So this is my academic mum. Hope you don't mind me calling you that. So at the end of 2010, I was a new father in need of a job. So Liv had been born, my daughter Liv had been born in 2009. And I responded to an ad that Dr. Diana Safati had placed for a research fellow to join her epidemiology research group at the University of Otago in Wellington. And I can still remember our first phone call. I have video memory of it. Don't you love it when you've got those things locked down? I have a video memory of our first phone call because we hit it off immediately. She'll tell you that I made absolutely no sense on paper, and will tell you stories about my in-person interview where I perhaps gave her several reasons not to hire me rather than to hire me. But like she has done ever since, she backed me. She was my second believer in an academic sense. On that day, I also met another extremely important person at that in-person interview day. And I have a sneaky suspicion that he had the ear of Di, or Di had his ear, or whatever, and that his opinion really mattered, and that's James Stanley. And James and I still work together religiously. There's very few, if any, papers that I write that James is not involved in, because he's my marker of quality. If James is happy, it's good. It's ticker. So I was very glad to meet you that day too, Yahua. So Di taught me about the causal roots of inequalities in health outcomes. She taught me to look upstream to find the reasons why we see the disparities that we see. Because I didn't come from an epidemiology background, Di made me sit on her post-grad epidemiology and biostats course, and I don't know if you remember, but there was a point where she wanted me to sit the exams, and I somehow wiggled out of it, thank God, because again, what is a cell? I wasn't so great. But there was a slide I remember in her in the course that really hit home for me, and it was a variation on this one. Life expectancy versus deprivation broken down by ethnicity. So what this is saying is that no matter where you live, if you're Māori, you live fewer years than if you're Pākehā. So it doesn't matter if you live in Seatoon, you're still going to live 3 to 4 years fewer than someone who's European. And then at the other end of this, around Cannons Creek, around Porirua, the difference is even worse. The lines never cross. And that always angered me. I got really frustrated when I saw this, because obviously it's more complicated than just deprivation. And this, by the way, happens more or less across all health outcomes that we look at. This is just one example. This happens again and again and again. I was very blessed to come into the department at a really busy, kind of thriving, kind of hive of activity time. So the BODE program and the C3 project started at the same time. So there was a whole bunch of us on Level H really feeding off each other, and it was a really wonderful atmosphere. And of course there was other things happening in the department. It was very busy, Aspire team, all these other things, smoke-free stuff going on as well. So it was a wonderful place to be. Now, the team that I walked into with Di, the C3 research group, as Di set it up and as it continues to be, kind of looks a little bit like this in terms of our focus. So it works at the confluence between cancer, chronic conditions and health service access. And this is quite a nuanced area to work at. Not everyone works at this. Sometimes you do one, sometimes you do the other. Doing all three is a juggling act. And always it sits within the context of health equity. So it sits within the context of trying to address the problems that we've talked a little bit about already. It's been a busy few years. So this is the projects that we've worked on together, some of which were under Di, and then Di left at around 2019, as we'll get to soon, and so we've continued on in her absence. And the project that we're working on at the moment, as already mentioned, is the program grant on the bottom right-hand side, which is pretty special. This is most of. There's one notable exception, which is Anna Davies, who's sitting over there. Kia ora, Anna, who wasn't there that day, but this is our program team. The most incredible, wonderful group of people who took a day off and went to Lyell Bay, which was fantastic. And I also want to mention Jonathan. He's operating on a person with cancer, so he's got a good reason to not be here. So Jonathan is one of my other really amazing mentors too, so he's there on the left. So you'll be pleased to know that I'm not going to walk through, this isn't the slide where I say, by the way, we're going through these one at a time, and I'm going to show you 10 figures. No, this isn't that kind of IPL. I'm going to show you probably 2 figures, maybe 3 for the entirety of the talk, because I don't need to explain more than that, because a picture tells 1,000 words. This is the one that I show most often because it really resonates. It sums up the main problem that our team is trying to deal with, certainly right now. Prevention is extremely important. We're operating at the other end of the scale, which is survival post-diagnosis. So, to walk through the probably 3 people in this audience that haven't seen me present this slide before. This is the top 24 most common cancers that happen in Aotearoa, New Zealand. The extent to which the blue bars push out towards, or push towards me on this side here, push out to the right, is the extent to which Māori have poorer survival than non-Māori for that cancer. So what we see is that for 23 of the 24 most common cancers diagnosed in New Zealand, Māori have poorer survival. The extent of that differs depending on the cancer, and also this is relative. So for example, melanoma is on top, but I could count the number of Māori who die of melanoma on these 2 hands per year. So it's a relative scale. But for example, lung cancer is sitting around about here, around about 30%. So a Māori with lung cancer is about 30% more likely to die than a non-Māori with lung cancer. But that's a lot of people. That adds up to a lot of people. This one is kind of a variation on this, and I promise this is basically the last slide I'm going to show, but it emphasises a point that I want to make. So this is that same data that I showed you just before, except I've also thrown into the mix how many Māori die of a certain cancer. So the extent to which a dot here is high on this vertical axis, that's how many Māori die of that cancer per year. And the extent to which those markers push out to the right of the figure is the survival disparity between Māori and non-Māori. So it's like an XY kind of scatter. Does anyone want to have a guess where lung cancer is? That's lung cancer. Lung cancer kills approximately the same number of Māori per year as the next 5 cancers combined. So in a way, lung cancer is priority 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 when it comes to cancer control for Māori. As you can imagine, working on these projects, I began to learn that health is politics, and health disparities are political footballs. And speaking of politics, rheumatic fever. This is a picture this is the Liley Medal presentation that we attended with Michael Baker's Rheumatic Fever Risk Factors team. So we're going to hard right turn now and just talk a little bit about rheumatic fever. So the point of this project was to try to understand why what causes rheumatic fever. And there's some familiar faces in this picture. Of course, there's Michael here who led the project. I was extremely honoured to be the manager of the project based up in Auckland, but also there's some other familiar faces. Neville's in that photo, Richard's there, as well as some very familiar people. So rheumatic fever is an autoimmune disease that's triggered by a group A strep infection. And the most serious consequence of that infection is rheumatic heart disease. Rheumatic fever is absolutely a disease of poverty and poor housing. So it has its roots in those social determinants of health that I started learning so long ago. So just to explain this figure here, this is not my figure, this is from Te Whatu Ora. This is the extent to which a column goes up, that's how many rheumatic fever cases happened in that year, and each bar refers to a different year. So the most recent data here is from 2023. It's a stack plot, which means what we've done is we've stacked ethnicities on top of each other. Blue is Māori, light blue is Pacific, green is everyone else. Rheumatic fever is absolutely a disease of Māori and Pacific children. My dad has rheumatic heart disease. I wrote a book about it called The Twisted Chain, which I've already talked about, which is a mixture of memoir, medical history, political call to action, but really it's Dad's story, and he was extremely generous in allowing me to tell it. It's available at Unity Books just down the road. They open at 9, but you can buy them online at most booksellers. Publishing The Twisted Chain put me in the political crosshairs to an extent that I hadn't experienced before. I thought working in cancer did, but I think maybe I had a barrier because Di and Chris, I could say, could you guys deal with this? Rheumatic fever, I definitely felt like I was in the crosshairs to a greater extent. Let's hope these work.
There is a lot of debate in political circles at the moment about healthcare interventions and prioritisations made with a consideration to a person's race. Mm-hmm. What have you made of that debate so far?
I think that it's showed us that the issue of ethnicity in New Zealand is just continually divisive, and we're such a young, almost an immature country in that respect. I think, I use the example in the book about melanoma. So we fund, melanoma costs us roughly $180 million a year. This is broadly speaking, and this was about 2021, 2022. Now, no one thinks of melanoma in the terms as being a European disease. We don't talk about we need to fund more melanoma drugs. We need to get more melanoma prevention policies in place because it affects Pākehā. Ethnicity isn't even mentioned, but it's still absolutely a European disease. More than 300 New Zealand Pākehā die of melanoma every year. I could count the number of Māori in Pacifica who die of melanoma on these two hands per year. But we don't think of it as a Pākehā disease. We think of it, this is melanoma, we need to do something about it. As soon as you start thinking about diseases that affect only Māori and Pacific peoples in the same way, all of a sudden it becomes about ethnicity, all of a sudden it becomes about race. And I ask in the book, what does that say about us?
There's quite a variety of different statistical indicators that can be used, and the circular requires that all of the different indicators that a person has can be analysed. So, for example, if we believe that there's a problem with rheumatic fever, as we saw an excellent interview from Jason Gurney on Q&A on Sunday in his forthcoming, or I think his book's out now, it came out on Wednesday, it might actually be that people who are suffering from poor housing are the people with the greatest need. It might be that people in rural areas are the ones that are having the greatest challenges around a particular health condition. So all the circular requires is for a government department to look at all of the characteristics of a person, not just say one race, another race, because that's divisive and lazy.
So there were two lessons that I learned from that exchange. The first one is that people don't always catch your meaning, and or they can reframe your words to suit their own purposes. And actually, I got in a little bit of trouble with my Public Health Advisory Committee for not being clearer about what I was trying to say there. I was essentially trying to say the opposite of how David Seymour took it. The other thing though to bear in mind is that you probably share common ground even with your sworn enemies, and we're going to come back to that in a little bit. Leads us nicely into talking about being useful, which is kind of the latest phase, or I'm trying to be useful in the latest phase of my career. There are two reasons why I asked for this IPL to be held at Wharewake. The first one is that it's one of my favourite places in Wellington. I just love the Te Ao Māori vibe. I love, we've had a number of really cool events here. Rami and the Te Aho team holds their kaimahi days, the staff days here, which is something that Di started when Di started the agency. So the staff days are held here as well. It's just got an amazing vibe to it. But also it's roughly halfway between my professional life at the University of Otago, Wellington, and my professional life at Molesworth Street at the Ministry of Health and Te Ao Te Kahu. Public service, where essentially I represent the university on a whole bunch of different committees, is extremely important to me. And I think as academics, an extremely important role that we play. I believe that public service wants to use evidence in academia to make the country and world a better place. So I think it's our responsibility to do more public service. Actually, I've put the Wharewake School Board here at the bottom, and there's a reason I've done that intentionally. I learned a lot of things working on a school board. So anyone who knows Warkworth knows that it's a farming town. It's an extremely safe national seat. It's an extremely leaning to the centre right, if not further right. There were a lot of ACT votes in the last election. So sitting down and having a discussion about why Te Kura o Puinui should be above Warkworth School in this logo, which is a real several meetings that we had when I was on the board, is actually a really important skill to learn, because you actually have to meet people where they are, and we're going to come back to that. Hei Ahuta Moai was the first proper board or committee that I was ever asked to be on. I'm so proud to be a member of Hei Ahuta Moai, which is the National Māori Cancer Leadership Group. There's lots of highlights, including when we were all made into cartoons by Toby Morris for the spin-off. That was pretty cool. Te Ao Te Kahu has been kind of one of my second homes. First with under Di. Di started the Cancer Control Agency, and then under the auspicious leadership of Rami as well. And I'm very proud to have belonged to that rōpū. Then we have the Public Health Advisory Committee. The Public Health Advisory Committee provides independent public health advice to the Minister of Health and the wider sector. Among other things, we've produced a couple of large reports, one on our food environment, which came out last year, and one on the social determinants of health that came out about a week or so ago. And if you want to share that far and wide, please do. We'd love to, it's been about a year in the making, and it's a pretty cool report, so hopefully you get use out of it. But I want to focus in on one particular story from my public service work. And really it's what I'd call the Equity by 2030 story. And it's a good place to shout out these two extremely important powerhouses of policy impacts, Di and Chris. I'm so lucky to have learned so much from them about how to have impact, and also very lucky to count them as some of my closest friends. So, the Cancer Care at a Crossroads conference. At the beginning of 2019, Di and Chris brought a whole bunch of us together, actually it was the end of 2018, brought a whole bunch of us together to organise this Cancer Care at a Crossroads conference. And the purpose of the conference was to create some momentum for cancer control policy and action in New Zealand, because this has kind of languished since the original cancer control strategy back in 2003. And I was asked to do a short presentation on what I saw were the cancer research priorities that we should be tackling going forward. But at the end of my talk, I wedged in a little extra priority, and it was one that occurred to me when I was ironing my shirt that morning. That's the first time I've admitted that it took that much thought. There were a few people here that you'll recognise as well. This is the organising committee. And Rami was there too. And this is before he was at Te Aotearoa. This is when he was a Canadian, not a Kiwi. So yeah, it was an awesome team. Anyway, this is the exact slide that I put up, almost the last slide of the presentation back in 2019, that New Zealand will achieve equity in cancer survival for Māori by 2030. Equity by 2030 was born, and the next day Chris said to me, "Mate, if it rhymes, it chimes." And it turned out that it did. It gathered momentum and people started talking about it. This is Father's Day 2019, and you guys will remember this quite well, Chris and Di. I pulled out my diary to see what I wrote down on this day, because Father's Day I'd usually write something in my diary. Amazing Father's Day. Presents in bed, yummy mushrooms and bacon on toast for brekkie, bliss. Met the PM at the launch of the Cancer Action Plan. I took this photo sitting behind Melissa and Blair Vining. Blair was a patient of Chris's who was instrumental in our fight for a new Cancer Action Plan, and Blair is no longer with us. In the centre is Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, as you can guess, and she was announcing the launch of the National Cancer Action Plan. So this is in September 2019. We held the conference in January, February 2019. That's how quick Chris and I are. She was also announcing the intention, within that plan anyway, was the intention to build a new cancer control agency which would be led by Di. And they're sitting next to David Clark and Ashley Bloomfield, remembering this is September 2019. Now, I had been part of a group of people, there were a few of us, so I've been part of a group of people who had helped put the plan together, and through some kind of black magic, we'd managed to get the government to agree to make equity by 2030 part of our National Cancer Action Plan. This idea that occurred to me ironing my shirt was in our National Cancer Action Plan. Then what happened? Any Aucklanders? Kimi, what does this photo mean? So this road is, no matter what time of day, this road's got plenty of cars on it. So this is level 4 lockdown in Auckland. As you all know, COVID made everything harder. Individuals, whānau systems were put under extreme pressure for a really long period of time. The government had already committed to health reforms, to delivering on the Cancer Action Plan, to creating a cancer control agency, but now also needed to deal with a pandemic that threatened to kill like tens of thousands of us. And as you may have noticed, things that are aimed to address equity for Māori have faced a pretty challenging few years since then. There is absolutely a part 2 to the story, and I had 15 extra slides that I deleted yesterday. But really that story is currently being written, and so it's a story for another day. Because I want to talk about what our promise to each other is. I made a rod for my own back when I decided on this title for the talk. several months ago. I had many times in between then and now where I thought if I could have just made it how to deal with imposter syndrome or something like that, it would have been much easier to talk to get to. But I do want to finish us off with some slides that I feel are important for talking through right now. I think it's time that we made our promise to each other, and it's not just the people in this room, but it's to all of us as New Zealanders. The first one is that we need to reject the idea that the health inequities experienced by Māori are inevitable, because they are not. Rheumatic fever is absolutely a preventable disease. It's been prevented almost everywhere else in the developed world. Cancer survival from point of diagnosis is malleable to intervention. These things can be addressed. The second thing is that we need to accept and confront the fact that the roots of these inequities reach back to our colonial past. How are we still arguing about this? He whakaputanga, te tiriti, all these things, it all lines up, it all makes sense in the long game, in the long view. The third thing is that we need to utterly reject the idea that taking action to right our original wrongs is racist and divisive. It's the opposite. The fourth thing is a really important one for me, which is, I think, and it's kind of aspirational, I think we need to fill the boots and become a global leader in Indigenous health and become the leader that others think we are already. So Chris and I sit on several boards together, international boards together, like international working groups, and they always defer to us when it's talking about anything related to Indigenous. Oh, you guys have got it sorted out over there. What are you guys doing? And we have to tell them, no, we don't. We're still working on it. This is a big work in progress, but they think we're doing great. That's more a statement about how bad it is in other places as much as it is about how well we're doing here. But I think that's a really cool opportunity. What if we were the global leader on how you do it, on how you fix original sins like this? And this is just my opportunity to shout out the World Indigenous Cancer Conference, which is happening next April, which Hea Huru Mowai are organising, because there's going to be some great kōrero to that effect at that conference as well. The last one is that I think we need to do all of this in a sustainable, apolitical way that survives election cycles. We can't start a Māori Health Authority and then bin it 18 months later. We need to find another way to get the same result if that's going to happen. How do we keep our promise? I think we're at a pretty crucial moment right now, and I think next election year is going to be really important. But I also think we need to become less reliant on Labour being in government in order to make forward movement on health equity for Māori. That can't be our game plan. To that end, I'd like to finish with a few things that I've learned after years of trying to be useful, so trying to put myself into situations like that Board of Trustees meeting, under the current government working with the Public Health Advisory Committee, about being useful at that research interface between research and public service. So, how to keep our promise? The first one is that I think we need to meet people where they are. We are all the product of our genes and our teachers. And when I say teachers, I mean people, but I also mean circumstances. The second thing is to remember that we are all the hero of our own story. So telling someone their story is wrong won't bring them across to your side. I think it would have taken less than 2 years to get that logo, the Māori words of that logo on top of it, if I'd just been had taken a different approach and not been so accusatory about other people not getting it. I think this is particularly to my academic colleagues, and please know that I'm looking at myself in the mirror when I say this. We always need to choose making a difference over being right. Compromise is not a dirty word, and small wins are better than backward steps. All or nothing doesn't work when you hit the real world. The other thing is that I think we need to listen with an open mind. Your sense of what is fair and equitable might not even be the same as mine. It certainly won't be the same as the person living in the farming community up in Warkworth. Find your common ground. It will be there. I even got David Seymour to say rheumatic fever and poor housing in the same sentence. And the key one for me, the last one, the absolute key one, is to stick around for the long haul. What I realised is that I was too flippant when I was making this call for equity by 2030. It sounded great, it was exciting, but it was a little bit irresponsible because equity is far too complex for a quick fix. We need long-term strategic thinking that everyone signs up to, not just one political party. I want to finish with a few quotes, and then I promise it's over. The first one is from Martin Luther King, and it kind of comes back to what I just said. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. The second one is my hero, Barack Obama, who said, and this is more a call to arms, this is it, the point of it all, to have that rare chance reserved for very few to bend history in a better direction. And the last quote is from Jason Gurney, 1996, Scaby Blossom. Pink is a very funny colour, yeah. Ngā mihi nui. Thank you so much, everybody.